We're looking at another sample of Inca stonework, and it's one of the most famous. It's the Coricancha located in Cusco. It's figure 176 in our textbook, and Coricancha translates from the Quechua to golden house or house of gold. And it was named for the fact that back in the day it was literally covered in sheets of gold on its upper levels. The Spanish, of course, removed these, and it is said and documented that it took 700 separate loads, basically cartloads of these away, the materials that were stripped off just the exterior. In addition, there was gold inside the Coricancha as well. And in addition to that, there was the Golden Garden, Golden and Silver Garden, that we will mention later and that you have a Smart History discussion of. This building was incredibly important. It was, say, exactly the site of the Axis Mundi within Cusco, which was already considered to be the center of the world, certainly the center of the Inca world. Because of its great importance, it was built with the very, very best Inca stonework, and that is going to include coursed stonework, and that means in this case that we're laying the stones in even rows. So no more polygons, no more stones that have many uneven sides. Everything is now kind of rectangular stone cut with the same dimensions so that it could be laid in a very formal pattern across the sloping, and I would like you to see that this is sloping exterior to the building. This was a temple that was dedicated to all the major Inca divine beings, and that would include Viracocha, the great creator god, among the major players into the sun god, and Mama Kia, the moon, but all of the other forces as well, rainbows and thunder and the ocean. Every divine being that would have mattered would have been represented and also supported here. This is a view of the interior. Today, this building is actually a museum and is open to the public, so you can go when you visit, you can go inside and see this. It shows us the high quality of Inca stonework. You can also see that it's coursed stonework, and that the stones themselves are reasonably regular in the forms somewhere between square and rectangle. Nevertheless, we also are going to see the continued use of trapezoids, and just a reminder here that the trapezoid is a form that is resistant to earthquakes because the top portion is smaller. That's one of the features of our trapezoid. Then the bottom portion. That also gives it the appearance of great stability, even from a distance. In addition to which, it of course is the hallmark, the emblem, the symbol of the Inca presence, and represents Inca architecture and the expansion of the Inca as well. This amazingly important temple also had an offering channel that ran from the main plaza in the city, a drainage system essentially, that would allow liquids to be carried from the main plaza to the temple. Typical of Inca premier engineering, but also a reminder that this was a place where respect was paid to the divine beings and also offerings were made. This is also my opportunity to remind you of the planted garden in the courtyard, and I have a sample. It's our corn cob that we've already looked at, or we will be looking at shortly in one of our talkies. It's gold and it's silver. And we do have in the Chronicles a description of this garden. So in the context of the Coricancha, I'd like you to be thinking about that. I'm just going to read you what the chroniclers said describing this garden of gold and silver. Quote, in one of these houses, which was the richest, there was an image of the sun, of great size, made of gold, beautifully wrought and set with many precious stones. There was a garden in which the earth was lumps of fine gold, and it was cunningly planted with stalks of corn that were of gold, stalk, leaves, and ears. Aside from that, there were more than 20 llamas of gold with their lambs, and the shepherds who guarded them with their slings and staves, all of this metal. There were many tubs of gold and silver and turquoise, and goblets, pots, and every kind of vessel of fine gold. It was one of the richest temples in the entire world. That is the reaction that one of the Spaniards had to seeing this pretty amazing creation by the Inca. It also most certainly, in addition to being splendid, would have overwhelmed and awed with the use of the symbols of the Inca, and that includes the trapezoid four we're seeing right here, windows on the interior, and these also align. So standing in front of one of these windows, you can look through the room of the next into the room beyond it. In addition, there were double jamb doors. Let's look. These double jamb doors reference the origin story of the Inca being born at Tiwanaku, which was also known as an origin point for the gods. The Inca were born from Inti, the sun god, and all of these very strong references helped to solidify the right of the Inca to rule and to remind everybody of the divine nature of the Inca in general. So it's justifying the throne, and it's an important symbol. But it is, in terms of the double jamb, you can see the door jamb here on the exterior, and then carved again inset, going in a deeper level, is the interior door jamb that is being borrowed from Tiwanaku. It is Pachacuti, the great Inca ruler, who is going to actually bring architects to Cuzco from Tiwanaku. You have probably noticed in looking at the exterior of the Coricancha, or what's left of it, that the style is not consistent throughout. And the reason for that is that when the Spanish took the city, one of the first things that they did was to reconstruct the Coricancha with a church, a Christian church, Santo Domingo, on top of the foundation that the Inca had laid. So this stuff up here is not made by the Inca. This actually comes from Spain, and the traditions sometimes actually blended a little bit, like with this material here, coming out of the influence of Islam that was so strong in the Old World in Spain. The site itself of the Coricancha, or perhaps more accurately Santo Domingo at this point, was damaged severely in 1950 by an earthquake. And I think, yes, you guessed it, the Christian church crumbled and the Inca walls remained intact, symbolically revealing, quite literally, the foundations of the native society to the highlands culture. There was a Spanish overlay with the remains of Santo Domingo on top, but today, after the rebuilding of Santo Domingo on its Inca foundation, we get a very vivid, very clear symbolic depiction of the blending and mixing of traditions that takes place in Peru, but in much of the New World itself in addition. Let's see an example. This is, again, the church and the temple blended together in the upper right. What we're looking at here is a photograph I took on one of my visits to Peru, and it is in a highland city very close to Machu Picchu, and what it shows is a Catholic procession in which a statue of the Virgin Mary, and she's shown right here, is being carried through the streets. This is clearly Christian. However, the tradition of carrying images in the street would belong to the native history of Peru and the time before the arrival of the Spanish. In addition to that, if you look at all of the dancers, and there is a performance here with music and with dance, you're going to see that they're masked. So what we have is a very visible continuation of a blending and mixing of traditions from native Peru with traditions from Catholicism in particular, but with Christianity coming in from the old world. And in many places, this combination, which is there today, is very, very striking. Let me end with one last example. This is a highland site that I would probably count as waka. That means sacred, imbued with a great deal of power, and having a kind of awe about it. It is a place where people would come and make offerings. And one of the things that you can offer is a small rock or a pebble that you might leave, remembering the reverence that is associated with rocks in ancient tradition in Peru and certainly with the Inca. So what we end up with is this huge pile of sacred stones out of which we have a Christian crucifix arising. I'd also like you to see, however, that that crucifix is draped and decorated with Andean textiles. This monument and many others very clearly documents a continuation of traditions in the Andes, blending the native foundations with the new traditions that were brought from the old world to the new one, mixing and mingling, and will probably continue to do so in the future. Therefore, we have to be very careful when we say that the Spanish conquered the Inca. I'm not sure that that's an accurate portrayal. There's much of Inca history, culture, tradition, and religion that thrives in the Andes today.